Hello world, this is me again, Brandon Wallace, and today I want to talk about privatization. I want to talk about what is privatization, who's for privatization, why they want privatization, and ultimately why privatization is bad. Well, firstly, let's talk about what is privatization. Really, everyone should know, and I think everybody knows, basically what privatization is all about. Privatization is the effort to take all of that which exists in the public good and turn it over to into the hands of the wealthy elite, or rather, to put it into a more basic definition, to put it into the hands of to put it into private hands, to make it privately owned. So again, the definition of privatization is to take that which belongs to the people and put it into private hands. Now, who wants privatization? Who wants to take that which belongs to the people and put it into private hands? They are conservative. All of the Republicans, I won't say all, but Republicans generally, and all conservatives, all of the conservative movement in this country at this time are behind efforts towards privatization. To label and identify an even more selective target of who is behind privatization, I'll use Bell Hooks's terminology. It's white capitalist patriarchy. Why do they want privatization? Well, there are those in this country who believe and who glorify in the 18th century models and those models that died out with progressive movements in the early 20th century, the late 19th century, who believe that such things as roads and hospitals and the airwaves and police precincts, all of these things they believe should belong in private hands for the benefit and the profit of private individuals and private corporations. And that said, it really is something to think about in terms of what that would mean and what that would look like if that were to come about. There was a time pre-20th century, in the 18th century, in the medieval period, and before those times, when there were private roads and private hospitals and private police forces, and everything was private. And if you wanted to travel on a road, it was private. And if you wanted people of wealth and of substance had private armies and private police forces to do their bidding. There was also private education. Education was private. This is also a part of privatization. Education belonged to those who could afford tutors to come into their homes and teach their children. Education was something that was private, was something that was for those who could afford it. And those who could not afford it, well, they went out and they pulled the wheat and they picked the cotton and they worked underneath and for the benefit of those who could afford to have those kinds of goods and those kinds of services. They were subsidiaries of the wealthy elite, right? So this is the picture. This is the paradigm which these individuals enjoy, which they uphold as a wonderful alternative to what we have now, and to an even more progressive picture of a truly common good that embraces all of humanity and that ensures that every individual within society has access to everything that exists within the common good. Now, what is the common good? Common weal, to use that ancient Anglo-Saxon terminology, that ancient Anglo-Saxon idea of it, right? The common good. Because I want to define this because most people, the average individual, is not certain of what is entailed in what I say is the common good, or what it means, what it is that is in the common good, that is of the public weal, right? Well, the common good, the common weal, public services, the airwaves belong to the people. The government, believe it or not, belongs to the people. We are the government, and those people who are elected to represent us, they are our servants, and they work for us as long as they are in office. They are supposed to represent our interest. What else belongs in the public good? There's public education. There's public airwaves. There's roads, police precincts. There are firehouses. Any number of things. The public services that you enjoy. Social security. All of these things are a part of the public good. They are a part of the common weal. They are there for everyone to enjoy. And this idea is anathema to those people who want to privatize. They don't believe that everyone should have access. They believe that these entities should belong in private hands for private individuals, private corporations, and those major stockholders in corporations to benefit from. Now, that said, as well, what are some examples of these attacks on the public good? Because I want to start connecting dots here. Attacks on the public good are not just the random call for ending Social Security or attacks on public education, but that is very key. Because in looking at contemporary events, we want to identify that which is a part of this measure towards privatization. Scott Walker's efforts in Wisconsin are very much efforts towards privatization. His efforts to end collective bargaining for public workers is his effort on behalf of the Koch brothers, right? This is why he was very much adamant to take the phone call when he thought that David Koch was on the other end of the line, because he thought that his very private corporate friend was on the other end of the line. His efforts to end collective bargaining and move those resources into the private sphere are an effort towards ending that part of the public good and making those resources private so that they can make profits for private people. And that's one example. Now, you also have here in Alabama, there are attacks on the AEA and efforts to end what little power public workers and workers, period. Workers in Alabama have the least amount of rights of workers anywhere, because there are no unions. There's no way for workers to barter for wages and working conditions, those kinds of things in the state, because it is a so-called, and this is the irony of it, a right-to-work state, right? Which means that you have the right to basically be exploited without interruption from unions and other advocates for the public good, right? So this is all part of efforts towards privatization. You also have people like Mitch Daniels, who sold the public roads in Indiana in, I believe it was 2006. That was also an effort towards privatization. These current attacks on NPR and public television, the public airwaves. The airwaves belong to the people. And yet they want to end public television, and they want to end national public radio. They want to end these things and put them into private hands. Now, one thing I do want to identify here is that the very basic definition of fascism is when government interest and corporate interest begin to blend together and become unidentifiable and indistinguishable from each other, right? So this is something to think about in looking at these efforts towards privatization. Whose interests are our public officials looking after? Are they looking after our interest? Are they looking after the interest of their wealthy friends who own corporations? And if so, is that the responsibility of the government? And especially thinking that with the idea that we, the people, are the government, and that these elected officials only work on our behalf. So these are efforts, these have been efforts towards privatization, and I want to leave you with this thing to think about, this idea to think about. Every effort taken by every Republican in Congress, taken by every Republican legislature in the country, and by every Republican governor since 2010, when they had their mini victory, has been an effort towards privatization. Take a look at everything that every Republican elected since 2010 has done, and you will see grand efforts on the part of the Republican Party and other conservative entities to privatize, to take public goods and make them profitable for their corporate friends and the wealthy elite. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.